So,
You gonna sing this?
No, I will not be singing,
Dance?
as much as I would like to. But no, I
Then
will
we'll
not
have
be
to pull the
singing.
fire alarm. Go ahead.
And I will tell you right up front that this will not be an uplifting presentation, because as you see the data that I'm going to present, you're going to probably sigh.
With the state budget contributions year after year, you have not given us uplifting data for about 15 or 20 years, yeah.
But we always make it work.
Well,
That's fun.
So, with that said, let me give you a little bit of background in terms of what brought us to this point of the presentation. So, we've been seeing a real spike in our enrollments at the elementary level. We've had to hire quite a number of additional staff because of the class size increases that we've seen at the elementary level, and in accordance with what the board policy and regulation calls for. So I want to go through some of the data that goes behind that, and what the capacities of the buildings actually mean, because I also think that there are some misnomers regarding what capacity is. So a couple of other things I wanted to note, just overall, and I'm going to focus more on the elementary level because that's where we're seeing some real growth issues. Our demographer, who updated our demographic study last year, projected our enrollment to be, at the elementary level, at 3,293. In our standard budget projections, and we do a straight line projection every year, and we've been very close every single year for the last several years, we were projecting 3,379 students at the elementary level. Our enrollment at the elementary level, as of today, is 3,562 students. That is 270 students, approximately 270 students more than the demographer projected, and 193 students more than what we had projected. We've seen a significant influx of students, and there's no particular explanation for it. There's just a significant influx of students. It's not related to development. We're just seeing students registering in East Brunswick. So, let's begin. Let's go over some of the terminology that is key in understanding some of this. We'll talk a little bit about actual classroom capacity. And let me just note, actual classroom capacity, there are various kinds of capacity. There's classroom capacity, which is specific to what's happening in the classroom. We have capacities related to how many students our media centers can support, our gymnasiums can support. We're not going to talk about the ancillary aspects of the buildings. We're going to talk about classrooms. And I will tell you that at a number of the elementary schools that have not seen some of the renovations that we've done, the expansions, that the capacity in the media centers and the gymnasiums are below what they need to be for the kinds of enrollment that we have at those schools. So that's one piece. Target capacity, we'll talk about that. FES Utilization Factor and district class size standards. So let's start with the first on classroom capacity. It is based on Department of Education standards. It utilizes what the actual square footage is of the classroom. So we take a room, we measure length times width, come up with a square footage, and there's a formula to determine how many students can fit in that classroom. It doesn't mean that the classroom meets the standard of what a classroom should be, whether it be a kindergarten room, a first grade, second grade, middle school, high school, what have you. It simply takes what is the square footage of that room. And based on the formula, you come up with a number of students that can fit. Depending upon the size of some of these spaces, it says that we can fit perhaps 34 students in the classroom. We're not going to put 34 students in the classroom. That doesn't meet what we want to do in terms of class size. So that's an important piece to understand. Maximum number of students to be accommodated, that I just talked about that in terms of the calculation, and it is blind to the potential impact on class sizes. So it doesn't take into consideration what our standards are or even what the DOE standards are. It is a simple formula that says, here's how many students you can fit into this classroom. The other piece is target capacity. Actual capacity, it is the actual capacity that's prescribed by the Department of Education. Now, what that does is it takes the classroom capacity and it establishes a level that is deemed to be optimal. And there are two different ratios that are associated with that. The percentages varies depending upon grade levels. And we'll talk a little bit further now. FES Utilization Factor, that is the Facilities Efficiency Standards. It is established by the Department of Education. It's not something that East Brunswick has made up. It represents what percentage of utilization should be applied to a classroom, anywhere from K through 12. And it is what derives what our target capacity is. There are two factors that apply. At the elementary level, it says, what is your maximum capacity? And 90% of that capacity is optimal. Elementary is defined K through 8. Secondary level, 85% of the capacity, the maximum capacity, is deemed optimal. So, what are our district size, class size standards? It is stipulated, it's governed by our policy and regulation. They establish guidelines for what our minimum, maximum, and optimal class sizes should be. There are certain classes that are exempt from that requirement, such as PE. And those standards do not apply to the special ed curriculum. Special ed self-contained classes have an entirely different set of standards that is dictated by law. These are across the board, according to board policy and regulation, what the minimum, maximum, and optimal class sizes are for East Brunswick. At kindergarten, the minimum would be 18, maximum 22, optimal at 20. Grades 1 through 5, and you'll see that actually carry through the remaining grades. The minimum is at 18, the maximum at 25, optimal at 22. When we reach that maximum level in the elementary grades, and particularly in the primary grades, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, we add an aide into the classroom. We've had to add many aides this year, unbudgeted positions, to be able to support instruction in the classroom.
What happens if a student transfers out or in and we now go below the minimum or above the maximum?
It won't change what we're doing in the classroom, and we're not going to adjust the class,
Right,
the
obviously.
enrollment within the classroom itself and try to split it up. We generally,
Mid-year
we
you
might
wouldn't do
have
that,
done
yeah.
that in the past if the space was available,
Yeah.
but that was very seldom an issue. So let me continue. You'll see some interesting information. So let's talk about actual versus target. So now I mentioned what that was. The actual being the square footage and what's the maximum number of students, applying the FES utilization factor, and then the target utilization. So at the elementary schools, we have, for example, the first one on the list is Bound. 238 students would be the actual classroom capacity. But when we apply the optimal utilization, that actually goes down to 214 students. And that applies across the board in terms of how you calculate what the number of students would be that should be in the building. Now, I will add another footnote to this, and that is when the actual classroom capacities were last calculated, we had a study that was done by our architect that looked at every space and how we were utilizing it. That was done a few years ago. What it doesn't take into consideration now is the fact that we've introduced more self-contained classes. And when we have more self-contained classes, it is reducing what that maximum capacity is. because what will drive that is what is required by law to sustain the self-contained programs. So, we move forward. Capacity versus total enrollment. I apologize, this looked better on my screen than it does up on the big screen, but we'll post this on the website as well. So when we look at Val Monroe, you'll see each of the red highlights. That is showing that the total enrollment as of today, in each of those elementary schools, it exceeds the actual class capacity and the target or the optimal utilization for those buildings. We are well over the enrollment capacity in 7 out of 8 elementary schools. So no matter what anyone says, we're over. They're here.
So
And so when we
enrollment,
look at, and I just want to remind that the fact that, what our minimum, maximum, and optimal numbers are here, and take that into consideration, you'll see the impact as we go a little bit further at the various grade levels. Yes?
so our enrollment is more than what was projected. And would you call it a drastic decrease over the last 5 to 10 years?
We have had a decrease in enrollment across the board. There's no question about that. But we're seeing an upswing at the elementary level. That upswing, if it continues, it's going to feed itself up into Hammersholt and then Churchill, then the high school. Hammersholt, Churchill, and the high school are not having an issue at this point. We are below the optimal range at this point in time. So that's not an issue. So I'm not going to focus on those 3 schools. But you're not going to take elementary children and put them into space that exists at the middle school, the junior high, or the high school.
So this was very helpful to understanding that, like, if you look in general at the high level, the trend is total enrollment is down compared to years ago, but it's the shift in just.
Where the populations are.
Population
Right.
And the populations are at the elementary level right now.
Yeah.
And we started to, the reason for this, we started to notice this summer during registration, because we centralized registration. So everybody came in to this office to register for school. And when we hit that, we went over 550 new registrations. That was significantly higher than we've had in the past. That's a gross number. There are students that disenroll from us, withdraw from school.
Right.
So that's not the total number of new students, but that prompted this investigation to take a look at each school, each grade, and it was quite impactful.
And I'd add on to that, so the number was
555.
55. So roughly, the normal course of registrations would probably be 50% of that. But with the kinds of increases that we're seeing, it's double. It's been double.
Okay.
So let's move on. So focusing again, this is now just looking strictly at the elementary enrollment. And what I tried to do, and board members, I'll make sure you get a printed copy of this as well. But if you don't mind, I'm going to move closer to the screen so I can talk a little bit more about the details. And I'll speak up for the microphone. So what we did was, in the last 2 columns that are the red columns, we have the first one, K-5 enrollment as of today, and that is strictly K-5. Now, in some of our elementary schools, we have the ELA program, and they're taking up some classrooms, but not many district-wide, and they're only in certain buildings. So I show what the impact is of the ELA as well in terms of total enrollment in the building.
Special education in K-5?
Yes, it is.
In and out of district?
Out of district is not in these
Okay.
numbers. This is strictly on roll
In our house.
in our buildings.
Okay.
So, Val Monroe, optimal utilization 214 students. The K-5 enrollment is 220. The total enrollment is 240. That includes ELA. At Chittick, 441 is the optimal utilization. The current enrollment K-5 is 500. there are no ELA programs at Chittick. At Frost, optimal utilization is 383. Our current enrollment is 477. And when we add the ELA, we're at 521. Irving, 368 students is optimal. K-5 enrollment is 480. We have no ELA program there. At Lawrenceburg, 432 is our optimal utilization. Our enrollment is 453. With ELA, it's 478. Memorial, 501 is optimal. There are no ELA programs at Memorial. The enrollment is 568. It is our largest elementary school. And Warnsdorfer at 435 being optimal. The K-5 enrollment is 448 students, and our total enrollment is 488.
So we're missing the column of actual capacity. It would be interesting to see.
The actual capacity. There was a lot of data, so I tried to.
Yeah, but it will be interesting to
But
see
even with
where total
actual
enrollment is.
capacity,
It would be interesting to see that.
We are significantly above actual capacity.
Are all of the total enrollment numbers, with the exception of Central, above actual capacity?
Yes. Yes,
So we're busting out of the seams.
we are. Okay, so let's talk about what our average class sizes are. And this is where there are going to be some size. And let me add, you'll see on the first one, kindergarten, across the board, our average class sizes at each of the 8 elementary schools, 15, 21, 23, 22, 14, 25, 17, and 19. And I have to add this footnote. There are no classrooms available. There are no classrooms available to be able to spread these out. Not in any school building. First grade, our numbers, average class size, 17, 20, 20, 26, 19, 23, 17, and 19. Second grade, 19, 17, 22, 22, 22, 23, 21, and 21. Third grade, 24, 19, 27, 23, 19, 23, 22, and 18. Fourth grade, 20, 21, 20, 25, 23, 19, 20, and 22. And fifth grade, 17, 19, 20, 21, 23, 22, 23, and 23. So what we're seeing is that in most cases, we are certainly not at optimal. We are at or over max, and there's no room. There is no room to do anything. Questions?
Any questions? Thank you for being finished.
Way to bring a meeting right down.
Should've gone first.
Okay, thank you. Next.